So I think in Instagram posts already, I apologize because I'm not going to say it today. I'm going to let you do it. But being a South African, trying to say your last name, I have. Did I mess it up
Yep.
when I did it
No,
before?
no, you were really close. Like you were like 99%. It's
I said,
Siembida.
oh, Siembida.
Yep. The IE is it's Polish, so and it's been Americanized since then. So yeah, it's a weird last name.
Yeah, I said Siembida or something like
Yeah,
that.
you were real close.
Siembida. Evan Siembida.
Siembida.
Siembida, sorry.
Yeah, there you
See, I
go.
messed it up again. I messed it up again. How am I
Don't
going
sweat it,
to
man.
phonetically say that? See, okay, there we go. Siembida.
Yeah,
All right, Evan
nailed
Siembida,
it.
knife maker extraordinaire.
I
Right?
don't know about extraordinaire, but I do what I love, and I love what I
Evan,
do.
introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Evan Siembida. I'm a knife maker from southeastern Ohio. Pretty heavily involved in the outdoor industry. I make knives for just about everybody, and I hunt as often as I can.
So, but when
Pretty much
we
it.
were connecting, you haven't always been a full-time knife maker, right? You obviously this is a passion project of yours.
Well, it's my full-time gig now. It's been a side it started when I was right out of high school. I was just interested in making knives. It was one of those things that my dad, who was a mechanic, he had, as a lot of mechanics do, buckets of just random fasteners and old files and whatever else laying around. And he said I could have some of the files to play with, so I ground some knives out of it, and then tried heat treating them with the torch. And they held an edge. They weren't great, but they worked, and I was hooked. So back and forth between making some stuff whenever I had time, and then college, and then working in a factory full time for 7, almost 8 years. It was just a thing that sort of evolved over time as just a project on the side that I loved doing, and eventually I ended up getting people that wanted to buy my stuff, and so that sort of evolved into a side hustle, which ultimately turned into a full-time thing. That's all I do now.
So when it comes to a knife maker, again, I'm completely in the dark. Okay.
Yeah.
How does that work? Because are there things that, how do I say this? Like, this is how like unprepared I am for understanding what are there, like copyrights to knives, like the shape of the knife, like because everyone's making the same shape of knife? Would you want to separate yourself in terms of a shape of a knife? What happens there?
Well, so you can copyright your knives. Some people do. A lot of knife makers don't. I don't. So technically speaking, somebody could rip off my designs if they wanted to, but you'd have a hard time selling one of my knives and claiming it's mine. Because then,
Why would they
somebody could
claim
just.
it was yours though? Wouldn't they claim it was theirs?
If they just wanted to counterfeit it, that's the only reason why you could do that. Other than that, if somebody wanted to rip off my design and claim it as theirs, I mean, there's nothing really stopping them from doing that technically. But people buy my stuff not just because of the shape it is; they buy it because it's mine.
So, what makes the knife yours? Maybe that's a better question. Like, go back to your thought process. Go back to your sort of thought process in the beginning to say, I'm assuming it's also evolving every single day, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's just like any other, like, I hesitate to call what I do art, but there is an art element to it, in that everything sort of flows and everything is, based on feel and things like that. Somebody who buys pottery, I mean, you can go to IKEA and you could buy a set of coffee cups for $5. They all match and they hold coffee just like anything else. But some people like to go and get something that's ceramic, that's handmade, by a person in a small shop, and they pay significantly more, but they're getting something that's handmade that's got, I don't know, like a piece of their soul put into that. There's something about the way that the pottery flows and the shape and everything else that's different than just something that's been molded and cast and masked. And it's the same thing with my knives. So you can go and you can buy something from Benchmade or Buck or Case, and they're great knives. They're stamped out by presses or plasma cut and almost entirely automated in how they're made. And while they work great, they're pretty soulless just because they're produced in mass. Every knife that you buy that has my logo on it has been made by me. It's been hand fitted, hand shaped. I pick up that knife 100 times and feel it in my hands before I put it in the box and send it to the customer. So it's past an extreme level of quality. I mean, I'm still human. I still mess up once in a great while, but I have a warranty for that. Everything has been made by hand for me. So, and that applies to my design. So like, for example, I've got, this is my Magpie model. This is actually one of the first, which is, this knife's 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I designed this knife around a time where I spent a lot of time skinning deer for a friend of mine who's a deer processor. He's a deer processor and he's a taxidermist, and he pays people to come in and skin deer for him
Okay.
while he handles paperwork. Deer season's really crazy. He gets in,
Sure.
I'll shoot 20 or 30 deer a day for most of deer season. So I got the opportunity, because he's my taxidermist, I got the opportunity to skin deer, get a lot more experience cutting up deer, which is beneficial to me as a knife maker, and more deer than I could harvest in a year, even if I had 100 tags. I couldn't spend that much time harvesting deer. So I get more experience cutting, and I also got to work off my taxidermy bill, which is a benefit for me. But this knife was actually designed based around my time there. I skinned.
Okay, well let's pause right here. Let's pause right here and let's get nerdy a little bit, okay?
All right, go ahead. Yeah. What do you got?
As you are skinning a whitetail, and you're using, I don't know what kind of knife you were using. You can tell me. And I want to know your thought process on like what is going through your mind as you're skinning to say, oh, this is what is it durability? Is it sharpness? Is it ease of use? Is it how it feels in your hand? Maybe it's all of the above. And then I want to know like how that you take that information and it translates into the Magpie that's in your hand.
Yeah, piece of cake. So it's actually all of those. And like I said, I was skinning a lot of deer, right? So like one day I might come in and skin. The one day I think I skinned 25 deer in a day, which is a lot. Like when you're skinning deer, you're pulling on hides and everything else. Your hands, your wrists, your arms, everything's sore. But your hands feel it the most, because you're gripping this knife. And if it's not super comfortable, and if the blade angle and the angle of the spine isn't efficient for, use with the human body, which, we have limitations in our flexibility and stuff, then you're going to feel more fatigue. And so like primarily like your first cuts when you're skinning a deer, anybody that skins deer knows this, anybody that hasn't, well, you're about to find out, but you work down the inside of the arms and the same on the legs until those cuts connect, and then you run right up the chest. And then you just kind of peel everything back. A lot of people will work down through, or they'll sit there and they'll try to work through, cutting up through the hide, so they don't cut the hair. I wanted a knife that I could stick the tip in and with the edge facing up, get the edge up and just run right down. And the back of that knife is riding against the meat and the bone, and the edge is doing all the work, and I can, in a single cut, zip right down a leg. And that's what I wanted. Something that would do what all those gut hook knives out there do without having that.
Yeah, because I was about to say, that's a gut hook to me. Like you put a gut hook in and you're not worried about puncturing, but rather it's just a smooth slide.
And those are handy, but you have two options with those. Either one, you have a separate gut hook, which that's one more thing you got to pack and forget or whatever else. Or you have one attached to your knife, ground into the back of the knife, which is, you're not going to forget it then, but it's clunky. It sticks out. It's in the way. It makes your tip a lot less narrow and less nimble. It's harder to do caping jobs and skin, heads on bears and things like that. So I'm not a big fan of those. They're super efficient for what they do, but they make the knife clunky. And as a separate one, that's just one more thing I've got to pack. So I wanted a knife I could do that with the tip. And so there's a couple renditions I made of this. This is the final one. And basically I'd go to work.
So let's talk about the first renditions. What was the first rendition, and why did you change it to a second and third and fourth?
So the first rendition had a little bit blunter or more aggressive of a belly here. So the tip was less fine. The spine went out almost perfectly straight and then humped down. And the thought process was it would go in, and that hump away would keep you from cutting into the meat. As you're doing the zipping cuts. And It was just too aggressive, so I brought it back a little more.
Too aggressive in
The
terms
next
of
week.
like it poked through, it got
No,
into
it was
the meat in the
the
cavity.
the curve was too aggressive this way, so I had to be more aggressive and work the angle steeper to cut down the deer, which made more fatigue on my wrist and it made it harder to control. It's easier to control when it's going straight than it is like this. So I ground that back the next week and I worked on that again. I found that I still didn't like the fact that there was a hump there, and I didn't like that there was so much belly in the edge. It just made it blunter than it needed to be efficient.
And when you say more belly in the edge, again, I'm a freaking
Yeah, no
neophyte,
problem.
okay? And
So,
that's why I'm
all
asking
right,
these
so
dumb questions, because people are going, Robbie, what? I don't know what he's saying about either. So if you're
my
watching this
bad.
on YouTube, Evan is showing us the knife on YouTube. Otherwise, if you're not and listening to this in your vehicle, you're just going to have to imagine this.
Well,
So
all right, so the belly and the edge. Think about if you have a beer belly, for example, your belly sticks out, right? Well, that's the curve of the edge from the handle to the tip. It's not straight. It's got belly. It sags. The edge curves. The more belly you have, the more the edge protrudes away from that line between the tip and the handle.
So
And
there are
bellies,
knives out there, the big Skinner knives that barely
yeah,
will sit underneath the handle, right? It drops underneath
exactly.
the handle. Okay.
Exactly. So, and that belly is beneficial because it gives you more edge. You get more surface area of edge to work with for a given blade length. And more belly means you can make sweeping cuts without using the tip of your knife, so you're less likely to nick into certain things. So when you're laying open, say for example, like the skin around the arms, the front shoulders, working into the armpit and things like that on a deer or any of your cervids, that belly is beneficial for that kind of thing. But that said, the more belly you add to a knife, the less your tip is pronounced. And the tip is what we use for all of our fine cuts. So when you're working around, if you're, say you're a backcountry hunter, you're probably not going to pack out the whole head of your mule deer. You're probably going to skin the whole head out and take the skull cap and, leave the rest of the skull back behind with your guts. Skinning that head out in the backcountry, it's really beneficial to have a tip. Using a big blunt nosed, shovel nosed knife with a bunch of belly is great working on the rest of the deer, but that tip is what you need to skin the head out. So I wanted something that could do that. So ultimately that's kind of where I came to. And, with this knife, oh my goodness, I don't even know how many deer I skinned with this knife. This is the final rendition. And, ultimately I arrived on a steel called MagnaCut. It was a new steel at the time. Now you can't look it up
Everybody
on
uses
Google.
MagnaCut, right?
I was going to say, you can't Google the word MagnaCut without your phone or computer breaking. But, it
Why
was a
is
brand new,
MagnaCut such a good steel?
well, yeah, so this is getting into the nerd stuff. So knife steels are kind of like rifle cartridges. We all love rifle cartridges, and, MagnaCut was kind of like the 7mm PRC of knife steels. It didn't do any one thing that was drastically better than everything else, but it did all those different things without giving up other things. So, traditionally you have edge retention, you have strength, and you have corrosion resistance. Those are the three attributes that make up a knife steel. And there's nuances between those, but, those are your three attributes. In order to have one of those or one or two of those excel, the other one has to go down. So you look at your cheap, like the really cheap budget knives from Buck or Case, and they make some really phenomenal classy knives too. I'm not ragging on them, but they're like their budget builds, the ones that you buy at Walmart. They never rust, like ever. I don't think I've ever seen a rusty knife in
Interesting.
420,
Okay.
stainless steel. But the reason
That's what
is,
those knives are made out of, is 420
usually,
stainless steel.
usually 420 or 440 A, B, or C. And those knives just never rust, and they're easy to sharpen, but they don't hold an edge for very long. And you find a lot of those with broken tips. They're not very strong. Like the steel's not very strong. And what that comes from is when you add chromium to steel, that's what makes it stainless. Chromium, nickel, a few other things, but chromium is typically what improves your corrosion resistance a lot. And when you add elements to steel, those react with each other and cause the carbides in the steel, which are the things that make it resistant to going dull, makes the carbides in the steel change. When you add chromium, it makes your carbides coarse. Coarse carbides are harder to sharpen to a fine edge, and because they're coarse, they also happen to make the knife brittle. So when you add, and I'm dumbing this down, I'm not nearly as smart as
That's
the
exactly
guys
what
that
we
make.
need. Yeah.
I'm not nearly as smart as the guys that invent these steels. But the general gist of it is, um, when you traditionally make a knife more corrosion resistant, you're making the knife more brittle at the same time. That's why a lot of the old timers are like, I don't want those newfangled stainless steel knives. They don't hold an edge or whatever else. And they're not entirely wrong. The old stainless steels, the first generation stainless knife steels, weren't very durable and they wouldn't hold an edge very well. But getting into modern steels, like you go all the way to like the most modern of hard use stainless steels, which is MagnaCut. A guy named Laren Thomas, who's a metallurgist, that's kind of like what he does. He was experimenting with adding nitrogen to steel, the same stuff that's in our atmosphere. He found out that nitrogen had a weird side effect to adding it to steels, was it allowed carbides to dissolve. So instead of being really, really big and coarse and chunky, which, I mean, you couldn't see them with the naked eye, but like if you looked under a microscope, they would look like these chunky crystals. When he added nitrogen, it allowed those to dissolve and become almost non-existent. They had all the benefits without the coarse, chunky carbides.
Interesting.
And so he was able to get away with using much less chromium to get the same effect of being stainless. And then he got a more wear-resistant steel that
And
held an edge
the
longer.
MagnaCut, the shininess is that stainless look, right?
No, I mean, you can make any steel shiny. You can make iron shiny.
Okay.
It's just whether or not it stays shiny. Um,
Okay.
but all these elements we're talking about, you can't see with the naked eye. Steel looks like steel. It's the performance of the finished product that it's affected. But by adding nitrogen to the steel, he was allowed or able to get away with using drastically less chromium. So there's some steels that use 15, 16% chromium to get that level of corrosion resistance. And MagnaCut only uses, off the top of my head, I want to say it's 8% chromium, 10% chromium. It's very low. And it ends up with drastically more corrosion resistance than a lot of the other steels that have drastically more chromium. And it also has better edge retention and it's stronger. So it's got more
better
breaking.
edge retention and it's stronger because of the reduction of the brittleness of the carbides.
Exactly. And so like basically it's the first steel that basically lets you have your cake and eat it too. To make it, simple. So it's got better edge retention than a lot of the other high performance steels. It's got better corrosion resistance than a lot of other steels, and it's stronger than most of our stainless steels in the market. So you're a lot less likely to break the tip off if you do something dumb with it. It's not going to corrode if you happen to be hunting or fishing near salt water. It's going to hold an edge. I mean, like this one right here, when I was playing with it, this was the first knife I ever made in MagnaCut. I wanted to test it before I offered it to customers. I wanted to see how many deer I could skin with this thing before I needed to sharpen it. And I got through 54 deer before I had to sharpen it.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was pretty insane. Now that's full disclosure.
And that's just skinning the air, right? That's skinning the edges and pulling it back.
Well, you're working around the whole thing. Like I'd pull wherever I could, but most of these deer were chilled. Hunters that take deer to processors, at least around here, tend to shoot something in the evening and bring it to the processor in the morning. So, yeah, they've been packed full of ice and, they're ice cold. So the hide's not exactly loose anymore. But no, it's pretty stinking good. I wasn't sharpening it at all during that time. The only thing I did do was run it across a chef steel, which is a non-abrasive, super hard rod that just fixed any rolls from hitting bone. Because I did use that to separate a few forelimbs and separate some vertebrae and stuff during all that too. But other than that, it got no sharpening, and it's just a testament to how good the steel is. It's fantastic stuff.
So, can you get MagnaCut in a non-shiny form?
Yeah, I mean, there's other things you can do to MagnaCut to make it not shiny. So you can.
But does it come to you shiny?
No, well, when I buy it, it comes in. It's called hot rolled bars. So basically, it comes out of the mill that makes it. They run it while it's still glowing hot through rollers and roll it down to the thickness that they want and cut it into sheets or strips. And I buy the strips, and they're almost black on the surface. They're dark, dark gray. Once I cut it and grind it, it ends up shiny, like inevitably. Now there's other options. You can acid etch it. That makes it dark gray. There's a few acids that make them almost black. And it's still stainless after doing that. You can bead blast it, or you can brush finish it to be satin finished. And then there's coating options too. So you could Duracoat or Cerakote it like you would a rifle and have it be a different color, including black or gray or whatever else.
Okay.
I just like shiny stuff.
So if I had a almost matte gray, matte black knife that is Magna cut, it's probably Cerakoted to look like
Probably,
that.
or if it's matte gray, it could be acid etched as well.
Okay. No, I think this is. And if I get like an orange Magna cut blade, that's Cerakoted.
Oh, that's Cerakoted, absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's cool stuff. I mean, it's just another knife steel. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just like any other steel. It's produced the same way. It's turned into knives the same way. It's heat treated with different recipe, but roughly the same process. It's just, different internal structure to make it perform different. That's all.
How many knife makes, builds, options, designs, maybe designs is the better term, do you have that you've come up with?
I have like 3 new designs in the works right now. And I've just released 2 new designs over the last 2 months. So I've kind of lost count, but I want to say it's around 41 or 42 currently.
Do we need that many knife designs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it
So
like
those,
guns, you can never have enough?
oh, you can never have enough guns. Absolutely.
No, knife designs.
But not knives, absolutely. So, I mean, that initially sounds crazy, but you think about the fact I've got, probably 7 or 8 different knives designed specifically for hunters, skinning knives, everything from like the magpie that I showed you, there's the magpie again, to this little guy, which is the meadowlark, and it's about a third of the size, and it does the same job. It's not as ergonomic, but it's half the weight, and you can drop that in your kill kit or your pack or your pocket, and it's super light. So if you're a, backcountry sheep hunter or whatever else, you've got the same job. I've got bigger skinning knives. I've got knives that are intended for butchering. I've got 2 different fillet knives currently. I've got a boning knife.
What's the Whiskey Jack? What kind of knife is the Whiskey Jack?
So the Whiskey Jack is a skinning knife, and it's got the same exact handle contours as the Magpie. In fact, the Whiskey Jack came first. The Magpie came after that. And it's
But the
based on the
blade
Whiskey
goes
Jack.
the opposite way.
Yeah, the blade curves the opposite way. It's got a little more belly, and the spine curves down and back up again, and that gives you
Correct.
a little longer and narrower point. It's a little more aggressive when it comes to, unzipping cuts. You got to be a little more careful that you don't poke into the viscera, but
Right.
it makes it a lot faster knife. So when you're working on detail work, you can move a lot faster with that knife. So, but there's all those. I've got a bunch of kitchen knives, and people that like kitchen knives, there's an endless array of those. And then I've even got crazy stuff. Like I've got a little side passion project of mine is I like hog hunting down in Texas. I mean, who doesn't, right? But my thing is I like doing the traditional Southern style. We use hounds, and then instead of using firearms, we use one of these numbers. So up there, up and close. But this knife was designed specifically for that. So 7-inch blade, it's double edged, got a big cross guard, and it's extremely light. So there's an infinite variety of the type of knives that fill different roles. Some of it's redundant, some of it overlaps, but.
So for Blood Origins, we did a collaboration knife.
Yeah.
It did phenomenally, by the way. What if you sold that Whiskey Jack on your website, what did you say it was retailed for?
That one would have been around, I'm going off the top of my head now, I don't have my calculator. I would say about 420.
Okay. Well, we made more than 420. So
excellent. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. So tell people, obviously it is sold. The silent auction is done. The Whiskey Jack that you created for us was a custom Whiskey Jack. It was sold, but tell us about what you designed.
Yeah. So it was the Whiskey Jack. I don't have one with me at the moment. My Whiskey Jack is currently buried with my hunting stuff. But It's, like I said, it's got the same blade length as the Magpie, which again is right here. Same handle design, but the blade curves backwards, and it's got sort of a Persian shape. And it's designed for skinning.
Yeah,
and
it's
for,
very.
for
I would say
a
that's
general
right.
hunter.
That's a great. And now it's a very Persian-like knife. Yep.
Yeah, and the design came from actually my uncle, who was my main exposure to hunting growing up. I grew up in a family that didn't really hunt. My mom's whole side of the family, who I was closer with than my dad's side, none of them hunted. They all thought, didn't think, but they all, if you ask them where food came from, it was the store. They never said the woods. My dad's side of the family, most of them weren't hunters. A handful of them would go fill a deer tag during deer gun week, but that was about it. But I had two uncles, one of which I got really close to, that both were big into hunting. And my uncle Carl, I became pretty close with him, still really close with him. And he's the one that exposed me to hunting. He got me into hunting deer and small game. And, heck, he was the first person I ever knew that went to Africa on a hunt. I think it was South Africa.
Wow.
But there was a knife that, his son was working at Buck Knives at the time, and there was a knife they had with a similar blade shape. And he said, "Man, I really like this blade shape, but I want to buy a knife from you." He's like, "Could you do something inspired by that style of knife?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to make a copy of somebody else's knife." He goes, "That's not what I'm asking." He's like, "I want you to do something with a similar, it's called a trailing point." He's like, "I like the trailing point." And I said, "I can do that." So I went to work and designed what ultimately became the Whiskey Jack. So trailing point, it was more aggressive in the tip, but a more nimble blade shape than what Buck had. Their knife was called the Kalinga. You can look it up. Very different knife. But I wanted something that was much more nimble. And something we didn't actually talk about whenever we talked about the handle actually on this knife. I call this my tadpole handle. It's probably what I'm most known for, and it's pretty unusual. For those of you guys listening, you should probably look up my stuff and you can see my handles. But it's got this long tail, so the back of the knife is not thick. It's not as thick as the middle or the front of the knife handle. And it curves downwards. And the idea was, when you're holding a knife, it's curving away from your wrist, from the palm of your hand or back at the heel of your hand.
Yeah.
And when you're doing working cuts and stuff, that gives you much more flexibility in your wrist without sacrificing comfort and ergonomics. So that ends up becoming a pretty big thing with my designs. But that was probably my first and most developed tadpole handle at the time, was on that knife. It's since then become extremely popular. I've got that knife, I think, on every continent except for Antarctica. Just about every continent has at least one Whiskey Jack.
Amazing.
A lot of guides use them in Alaska. It's a fantastic knife for that.
Yeah. And so you made a custom one for us. Can you go through the elements of that custom?
Yeah, so that one was in, and I chose, it's going to sound surprising because we just talked about Magna Cut, how much we love it. That one was in AEBL stainless steel. Going off memory here. Which is my other favorite steel. In fact, most of my personal knives are in AEBL stainless steel. It's a steel that was designed specifically for knife making, like Magna Cut. Most of our steels today are made for other things and just happen to get side use for knives. AEBL was designed for knives. It was designed for razor blades, so it takes a phenomenally thin edge.
Okay.
You can put a scary edge on those. And it's extremely durable. It's probably our most durable stainless knife steel in existence right now. I don't know of one stronger. It's as strong as some spring steels. It's stainless. It's easy to sharpen. Edge retention is still very good. It's extremely low maintenance. There's nothing to not like about AEBL. And then I did the handle scales, the slab material on the sides. I did that in giraffe bone, which was really stinking cool. I love giraffe bone.
So where do you get giraffe bone? Is it just something that it's just a commodity that you can buy as a knife maker?
Yeah, actually, there's a pretty decent supply out there of giraffe bone. It sounds odd, but you can look it up online.
No,
there's
I can imagine seeing knife makers, and your workshop probably may look the same. Is that you've got all these different bins with all these different materials, right? You've got horns, and you've got bones, and you've got mammoth ivory, and you've got all sorts of shit.
It's a little bit like that. So I do have 2 big giraffe shin bones in my shop right now. And you've seen giraffe shin bones. They're huge.
Yeah.
But those are raw bones. I still have to process those yet. A friend of mine shot a giraffe in, I think it was Namibia last year, 2 years ago. And he brought back the shin bones. He wants me to do some knives for him with them. But when you buy knives here stateside, processed already, they tend to be what's called stabilized. So if you saw the knife that I made for you for the auction, it had a bunch of color to it. It wasn't just white. Bone, when it comes off a giraffe, is just white, like anything else.
Correct.
But it's so thick. It's like half an inch thick before you get to the marrow pocket, that as it dries at different rates, the inside, the outside, and it causes a bunch of checking, just like a bunch of seasoned firewood. And that gives you the possibility of adding character to it. It also adds porosity, so it can absorb moisture and, whatever else. So it's typically stabilized, and stabilizing is where you put bone or wood or, there's a bunch of weird stuff, cactus, all kinds of things, that they do this with. They'll put it in a resin chamber. So usually it's PVC pipe, big, huge thing full of resin. The resin is really thin, like water thin. And it's usually dyed. So they'll add black or brown or sometimes even bright colors to the resin. They'll put the stuff inside the resin. They'll seal off the chamber and they'll draw it under heavy vacuum. So like 30 inches of vacuum. And it'll stay under vacuum for a couple hours to a couple days. And that basically pulls all the air out of those pores, those cracks, and replaces it with resin.
Fills it with resin. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's taken out. It's allowed to dry and cure. And then it's processed into slabs. So it's split down the middle, cut into slabs about 1.5 to 2 inches wide, 5 inches long, give or take, and then it's sold in book match sets. So it's 2 pieces. And that's how guys like me tend to buy it. In the case of the Blood Origins knife, that was in fossil color. That's what they called it. And it looks just like ancient bone whenever somebody digs something up in Russia or whatever. So so that's what we used there. And then I used copper hardware I think it was copper.
Yep.
Copper hardware.
Copper, brass. I think it was brass.
Maybe it was brass. I did a bunch of copper recently, so that's why I couldn't remember. So it's brass hardware. I call them loveless bolts. They're basically a mechanical screw with 2 nuts that are round. So when it's ground, it looks like a bullseye, but it's mechanically strong in addition to having the epoxy joint. And then I put really thin blood red liners, which are a thin layer of pinstriping between the material and the blade. So just to finish that off, it's a beautiful knife.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And congrats to the silent auction winner for bidding it up and taking it home. But we
got a heck of a knife.
Yeah, but we do have something to release here on this podcast, because in the process you're like, well, I don't want to just build you 1 knife. We're going to build 6, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got 5 more that we can auction or are up for sale.
Yeah.
And so the people that did bid that did not win it, I'm going to reach out to them and tell them about it.
Yeah, and then send them my way, and we'll get one in their hands, because those are really stinking cool.
Yeah, so if anybody's listening to this, everyone's listening to this podcast, and you want one of these knives, and you're like, man, I didn't get it at the silent auction, we'll put Evan's details in the show notes, and also you can reach out to you via Instagram, right?
Instagram or text message, phone call. I
don't want to put your number out on this podcast.
My number is everywhere. It's on every other podcast I've been on. You can Google my name. My number comes up. It's not a secret.
Okay, well, let's give them every way they can find you on Instagram first.
Yeah, Instagram's probably the easiest. Facebook is the same. It's the same, same name and everything like that.
What is the name?
Siembida Custom Knives. That's
with underscores between them, right?
Yeah, and you can probably put the name or the link on the show notes. But
yeah, we'll do that.
Siembida Custom Knives. And
then since you're okay with your number going up,
yeah,
call or text you at
740-270-9057. And
say that one more time.
740-270-9057.
Epic.
And it's worth noting too.
There's only 5 left.
Yeah. And it's
Okay.
worth noting too, in addition to that, I am a custom knife maker. That's pretty much my bread and butter. So if somebody wants to get on the list to get something made, man, I'd love to make their dream a reality. I do have a wait list. It's around 10 months out right now, which is pretty standard for custom knife makers. So if somebody does want to get a knife, or they just want to ask questions and find out like, hey, I'd like maybe a kitchen knife set, a custom knife, whatever, give me a call, ask me, shoot me a text, whatever. I'd love to talk to them. And we can talk about the wait list and, get them a spot on there and maybe make them a knife or two.
Amazing. Well, Evan, thank you so much for, number one, supporting us and stepping up with that knife, and appreciate you being a friend of mine and a friend of Blood Origins. And just again, thank you for all the support.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Anytime.
Well, I hope we didn't get too nerdy. I needed to learn a little bit more about knives, and you're the perfect teacher for it. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, man. It was a good time.